No one expected Iran to strike like this, and no one dared to respond. It was a night that began like any other in the region, tense, watchful, but quiet. Intelligence channels buzzed with the usual chatter, satellites scanned the ground, and analysts sat in dimly lit rooms staring at screens. Then, almost without warning, the sky lit up. From hidden launch sites deep within Iranian territory, missiles began their ascent, silent at first, then roaring with power as they cut through the night air. For years, the world had speculated about Iran's military capabilities. Was it all talk? Could it really stand against the combined force of nations that had spent decades encircling it with bases and fleets? On that night, those questions stopped being theoretical. Iran didn't just answer them, it tore them apart. The first wave was a shock, not because it happened, but because of the precision. Missiles arced high above the deserts and mountains, guided by systems that many had dismissed as outdated. Yet one by one, targets hundreds of miles away were struck with pinpoint accuracy. Radar stations flickered and failed. Air defense crews scrambled, their screens lighting up with warnings they had hoped they'd never see. Inside military command centers across the world, disbelief spread. This wasn't the image of Iran that intelligence briefings had painted for years. This was a coordinated, calculated demonstration of strength. Every launch, every impact, seemed choreographed to send a message, not just to the immediate enemy, but to anyone watching. Iran was willing to act, and capable of doing so at a scale few had imagined. The attack didn't come out of blind aggression. It was timed, deliberate, and clearly meant to respond to years of mounting pressure, sanctions, and military posturing on its borders. For Iran, it was more than just a military move. It was a political statement, a refusal to be cornered. The world had pushed, and Iran had just pushed back harder. And yet, the silence after each explosion was perhaps more telling than the explosions themselves. No immediate retaliation, no reckless overreach, just silence, as if daring the other side to make the next move. That night changed perceptions forever. As the smoke from the first strikes drifted into the night, the rest of the operation unfolded like a tightly written script. Analysts who had once dismissed Iran's arsenal as a mix of outdated Soviet-era tech and hastily assembled domestic projects were now watching in shock. The level of coordination suggested a command structure that had planned for this moment for years. Reports began filtering in from multiple locations. Strategic military bases, radar arrays, and logistical hubs were hit almost simultaneously. This wasn't random targeting. It was crippling the eyes and ears of the opposition. Without those systems, any counterattack would be slower, less accurate, and far riskier. Even more surprising was the restraint. Iran didn't target civilian infrastructure or populated areas. The strikes were aimed purely at military assets, a move that kept the attack within the realm of calculated deterrence rather than indiscriminate escalation. It sent a second message: we can hit you hard without crossing the lines you'll use to justify all-out war. In the days leading up to the strike, there had been whispers of movement within Iran's military units, but no one took them seriously. The assumption was that Iran, like so many times before, would posture, threaten, and ultimately stand down in the face of overwhelming global pressure. That assumption had just been shattered. The regional ripple effect was immediate. Neighboring countries, many of whom had quietly sided against Iran for years, began recalculating their positions. Leaders who had once dismissed Iranian warnings were suddenly calling emergency meetings. The Gulf, always tense, was now on the edge of something far bigger. What unsettled many observers the most was the complete absence of a quick military reply from the targeted nations. In the past, such an attack would have triggered immediate retaliation, missile for missile, strike for strike. But now, those nations hesitated. The cost of escalation was suddenly too high, the risks too unpredictable. For the first time in decades, Iran had shifted the balance, not by matching its rivals in raw firepower, but by proving it could land a blow they weren't ready to absorb. In the hours and days that followed, the world's media was consumed by one question: what happens now? Footage of missile trails arching into the night sky played on loop, accompanied by maps and speculation. Some called it reckless. Others called it a masterstroke of strategic deterrence. Behind closed doors, diplomats scrambled to prevent the situation from spiraling. Statements were issued, threats were made, but notably, no one was launching anything back. The silence was louder than the missiles had been. It spoke of calculation, of weighing risks and realizing that a hasty strike could ignite something uncontrollable. Meanwhile, inside Iran, the mood was defiant. Crowds gathered in public squares, waving flags, chanting, and celebrating what they saw as a moment of national pride. For many, it was proof that their country could stand on its own terms, unafraid of those who had long sought to intimidate it. Military analysts pointed out that this wasn't just about hardware. It was about timing, preparation, and psychological warfare. Iran had chosen a moment when its rivals were distracted, divided, and unsure. The attack was a show of force, but also a show of intelligence, knowing when and how to strike for maximum impact without crossing into total war. And yet, the unanswered question remains, was this truly the peak of Iran's capabilities, or just the beginning of a new era in regional power dynamics? If this was a warning shot, what would the next step look like? For now, the balance has shifted. The old assumptions no longer hold. The region knows Iran will act if pushed, and it will act decisively. The world has seen that the cost of testing Iran's limits is far higher than many had imagined. Would you call this defense or dominance? Drop your thoughts below.